Who here has heard of Tornado Cash? Show of hands, yeah, cool. Some of you haven't, okay. Who here has heard of the privacy pools paper? Who here has actually seen me give this talk before? I think one or two of you. I apologize in advance for using some of the content from previous talks in this one, but I tried to go through and bring it up to date. This talk is going to promote privacy pools, which is the paper that I wrote with Vitalik in the aftermath of Tornado Cash. And then we'll also talk a little bit about the legal cases around Tornado Cash. I got a bunch of questions in the time that I've been here about, both the tech and the legal, so I thought, I'll add some of that in there too. So one of the first things that I like to start out with is talking about why we care about privacy. And this is one of my favorite examples where the Dutch had a really good KYC system. They knew, they were really good at know your transaction, know your customer. And so they also, unfortunately, when they were captured by the Nazis, had the highest incidence rates of Jewish deaths and during the Holocaust. And the lesson to learn from this is that even if you set up your system and you think you're a good guy and so you won't abuse the power that you have over your system, you can't always ensure that the next guy is going to be a good guy or have your values aligned with theirs. And we see this repeat again and again. So Privacy Pool is a new privacy protocol. It's a fork of Tornado Cash with compliance built in. It allows users to publish an additional zero-knowledge proof demonstrating that their funds do not originate from known unlawful sources. So TLDR is prove that you aren't North Korea without revealing who you are. So the timeline of us working on this is that on August 8th, Tornado Cash got sanctioned by the US government. I'm going to explain more about why that all happened later. First, I'm going to just focus on privacy pool stuff. And then later that month, Vitalik came up with an idea about privacy pools on a podcast with Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase. A couple months later, in February of 2023, the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank published a report on Tornado Cash. And then a month after that, did a demo of a very basic implementation of privacy pools at ETH Denver. And it was pretty funny because you basically, you would see a list of the deposits and you'd have a checkbox. And so you'd click on them and you'd say, I'm, not this guy, not this guy, not this guy. And then withdraw, and you could prove that you weren't those people. Obviously, that doesn't scale. And so after we published this paper, we started a company called Oxbow, and we raised some money. That's the ... And now, finally, 2 weeks from now, we plan to launch all of this stuff at ETH Denver again in 2025. So why privacy pools? Well, initially, the problem that we were trying to solve is that public blockchains are transparent, and we want to avoid revealing our balance and transaction history with every payment. Anytime you send someone money, you can see how much money they're getting from everybody else. They can see what else you're spending your money on. It's not a great system. We were jealous of Zcash, basically, because we thought that it was pretty cool what they had, and so we wanted to build our own. And so our general solution was, let's make something, a new privacy system. It was the second zero-knowledge proof deployment, and it was Tornado Cash, and so it breaks the links between deposits and withdrawals. Very simply, how it works is, there's a 1 ETH pool, 10 ETH pool, 100 ETH pool. You deposit 1 ETH, and sometime later, when you go to withdraw 1 ETH, you provide a proof that you have deposited it and not yet withdrawn it, and the only thing that anybody else sees is that you withdrew from that pool, or some withdrawal happened from that pool, and they don't know which deposit it's necessarily connected to. The problem happened after North Korea invaded Tornado Cash, because they hacked a video game for hundreds of millions of dollars and started depositing money into Tornado Cash. And so that resulted in the Tornado Cash smart contract addresses being sanctioned by the US government. It was the only program considered a terrorist by America. And so limited users, or legitimate users, had limited options to dissociate from criminal activity. And there was a compliance tool that the Tornado Cash team built themselves that allowed you to prove that your deposit, your withdrawal came from a specific deposit. But in order to navigate that, it was a little bit difficult. I think that's in the next slide, yeah. Because basically you have to prove to a specific financial intermediary, and then they have to do some sort of data sharing protocol in order to rule out who are the good guys that did actually give us the proof, who are the bad guys that didn't. And so the solution to that problem is allowing a public proof where you dissociate from any illicit funds that might be in the system. So the Federal Reserve report on Tornado Cash was written by actually the same guys that we wrote the privacy pools paper with. This is how we found them. And so they thought that basically users should have to provide these proofs of which deposit they have to some regulated financial intermediary, mandating the use of the Tornado Cash compliance tool. And these guys are from Switzerland, and so they like privacy, and they said, crypto asset mixers such as Tornado Cash may become an integral part of public blockchain infrastructure. To a lot of the big money people in the world, public blockchains seem silly because they are used to having a lot of privacy in all of their financial operations. Now I have a personal nitpick, which is that technically it's not a mixer, because if it was a mixer, you wouldn't be able to prove which specific deposit your money came from. If you want to go even deeper, it's technically a mixture of addresses, but nobody really cares about that. And the funny thing is that while this is happening, after this happened, then Alexei, who was arrested in the Netherlands, one of the developers of the Tornado Cash system, the judges, the prosecution, basically thought that there is no legitimate use for Tornado Cash. And the St. Louis Federal Reserve paper said, "We argue that there is a relatively straightforward way to generate a separating equilibrium. If Alice's funds come from a legitimate source, she can share a cryptographic proof that links her deposit and withdrawal address." And Dutch prosecutors just didn't care, and they said it was, they called the compliance tool bullshit in court. So this is me hanging out in Switzerland at the University of Basel. That's the Tower of Basel. It's the headquarters of the Bank of International Settlements. It's kind of the final boss for crypto. And so this is a little bit of technical information about how this works. So when you go to withdraw, instead of just providing one proof, which you would normally provide, which says, hey, I have an unspent deposit, now you would provide an additional proof that says, also, my deposit is on this list, which is a subset of all of the deposits that excludes potential bad actors. So we call these things association sets. So association sets in privacy pools could be, the full subset of previously made deposits. Maybe you don't want to dissociate from anybody. It could be only the user's deposit. Maybe you can actually just prove that you are a specific deposit using the system, a whitelist of one, or anything in between. And so the user provides a Merkle root of the tree that includes all of the deposits that they are trying to prove against as an input to the withdrawal proof. And it basically lets you dissociate, and it helps people isolate the bad actors using the process of elimination. So for example, if the first four people on using the system all deposit, and then Eve deposits, and all four of Alice and Bob and Carl and David provide a proof that says, hey, I am one of Alice, Bob, Carl, or David, and I'm not Eve, then Eve can't provide that proof, and so it's pretty obvious which one Eve is. And so the association set can be based on inclusion or exclusion. I kind of use these terms interchangeably. It doesn't really make a difference. Essentially, you prove that you are either on a list or not on the list, and it could be I'm on the list that excludes the bad guys, or I am not on the list that includes the bad guys. So it works the same way. So this is what I was saying. In practice, users will not be manually picking and choosing which deposits to include in their association set. The demo had that click, 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 not this guy, not this guy, not this guy, withdraw. But obviously that doesn't scale. So we made an automated system, and we manage a whitelist that we publish publicly. And so we vet all of the deposits that come into the system. We do a trace back of their funds. We use Chainalysis. We have internal flagging tools. We have manual review, for a large amount. We do continuous monitoring. And so, it's important that we try to avoid allowing known terrorists into our association sets, and also DeFi hackers who might not be, considered terrorists by OFAC, but I don't want to associate with the people hacking my friend's DeFi protocols. We are pretty, inclusive of wallets where it seems pretty legit in the sense that, the money comes from Coinbase or some other KYC'd exchange. That's probably fine, and we can approve them pretty quickly. And we use this inclusion delay. So after the user deposits, there's a waiting period before we include them on the whitelist where we have an opportunity to vet the deposit and see if it makes sense to include or not. Some additional notes is that the Merkle root of the association set should be published on-chain, and that allows basically a historical record of what association sets have there been, so that we can't change things up later and trick people. And in our case, it actually is required because I'll explain more, but we allow users to only withdraw privately if they actually can prove they are on our whitelist. And you also want the ability to download the entire association set. So we publish it on IPFS. So when we update the Merkle root on chain, it's actually the Merkle root plus the IPFS hash. IPFS stands for Interplanetary File System. It's just a big blob of data storage that anybody can access. And so we also make this stuff available on API. But the reason you need the whole thing is because if you just go to some vendor and you're like, hello, can I have my specific branch that I need to prove my deposit? Well, then you've just revealed which deposit you are. So you actually need to download the whole thing, and then locally you compute the proof based on your specific branch that allows you to only be the one that knows which deposit you were. Any question? Great question. So the question was, are there instances where people get removed from the whitelist? And I'm going to say yes. And so we initially were not having like an expiration built in, but I think it's worth doing, where basically when you pay a vetting fee in order to get on the whitelist, that gives you membership into the whitelist for X time, let's say a year or 2 years, or maybe you could pay more to be longer. And the reason we have to do something like that is because our liability extends through the lifetime of however long that deposit is on our whitelist. And we're constantly monitoring, and we're paying to constantly monitor for that deposit, because if, for example, somebody deposits into our system and then turns around and then sends other money to like Hamas or something, we're going to remove them from the whitelist. So that's why we have to constantly monitor. However, we have a function called the Ragequit. And so this was basically the compromise that we've made with our lawyers in designing this, such that we know we do not have custody of the money in the system. Anybody can withdraw at any time, but if you are removed from the whitelist, you can only withdraw publicly back to the original address that you deposited at. And this part of the system is immutable, which means we cannot actually change this. We can't upgrade this at all. And so, yeah, but if we remove people from the whitelist, then they can no longer withdraw privately. And so we can't rug you retroactively in the sense that if you've already withdrawn the money, then we don't know anything about that withdrawal. But for the money that you still have in the pool, it can only go back to your original deposit address. The reason it's called Oxbow is because this is a oxbow lake forming where a river bends, and then it, the bend sort of merges with itself, and then it creates a pool of isolated liquidity. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to isolate the bad funds from the good funds and allow the good guys to have privacy for themselves. So I joined Oxbow as a CTO. It's going to be the first association set provider for privacy pools. We're planning on launching our open beta next week, so please try it out and test out our KYT, Know Your Transaction system, where, see if you can get on our whitelist. Try it out. Follow us at 0xbow.io, pronounced Oxbow. .io is the website, but on Twitter it's just 0xbow.io. Okay. Let's talk about Tornado Cash. So this is the story of how it happened. Is that it's just a privacy protocol used to generate fresh wallets. Why is this important? Because the normal way that people were getting privacy in crypto was basically running their money through Coinbase. It's not a very sophisticated privacy system. It's not very difficult to call up Coinbase, get a support engineer, pay them $1,000, and ask them to give you the entire transaction history for some withdrawals that you see on the blockchain. A better system is if nobody knows. So we as Ethereum developers were jealous of Zcash's private money system, and so we wanted our own. Moloch DAO, which is a punk rock themed open source grants giving organization that I helped found, paid for all of the grants for Tornado Cash. It was the second zero knowledge snark deployment in history after Zcash. There was a 1,000-person trusted setup ceremony, and we actually didn't give the grant to the Tornado Cash team. We gave the grant to a different team, and they were so pissed off that they didn't get the grant that they built the whole thing in 3 weeks. I was very impressed. And then from that point, we gave them a retroactive grant, and then we paid for all of the rest of the development and the audits and so forth. I was using it for personal privacy, for payroll mostly, and Vitalik, who's a hero, was using it to send money to Ukraine without the Russians figuring out how much he was sending to Ukraine. Everything was going well until North Korea hacked a video game for $600 million. This is the Axie Infinity, the play-to-earn video game. Why they had $600 million, I don't know. Different story. So they started depositing hundreds of millions of that money into Tornado Cash. And only a few months later, OFAC sanctioned the Tornado Cash contracts and made it illegal for Americans to interact with them under the penalty of up to 25 years in prison. The interesting thing about this is that if you see this second little hump, that is when Tornado Cash got sanctioned. And it went down about 50% in 1 month. But since then, the TVL of Tornado Cash is actually up by 50%. And this is because the devs do not have control over the protocol. They can't actually stop anything. The final thing that Moloch DAO contributed to Tornado Cash was helping set the admin key to 0 so that it could never be updated again. It was fully immutable. So anybody can access this with a UI that they run locally, a command line tool, Etherscan even. And there was no admin key to freeze the deposits. We saw that as a security vulnerability for all the users. Well, we're thinking if the admin key gets hacked, then all of the users suffer, so we might as well set it to 0 and protect everybody. And so I don't think, these are not the droids you're looking for. These the developers of the system are not the criminals, like North Korea is the criminal, right? So there was legal action against this guy. His name is Alexei Pertsev. 2 days after the sanctions in 2022, he was arrested in the Netherlands. He was held without bail for 9 months. He was finally released in April, and then at his trial in, I think it was May, he was charged with laundering over 500,000 Ether, which he should have known was of criminal origin. Charges with Alexei denied, and he was found guilty and charged with a sentence to 64 months in prison minus the time served. So the type of stuff that they said in the verdict against him was that they actually acknowledged that he couldn't have stopped anything. So they said it makes it virtually impossible to take Tornado Cash offline. And they also acknowledged that Alexei didn't have any power over the funds. And so they couldn't, seize the funds or do anything to help law enforcement, reclaim funds. They were getting inquiries like, hello, can you help us? We got hacked. We saw the money went into Tornado Cash. Please send it back to us. They're like, we can't do anything. So, but the argument that the Dutch court made was that they should have known better. And so it was foreseeable from the beginning that Ether derived from crime would be deposited into Tornado Cash, and therefore the operation of the system is completely their responsibility. So they said if the defendant had wanted to have the possibility to take action against abuse, then he should have built it in, but he did not. Tornado Cash does not pose any barrier for people with criminal assets who want to launder them. That is why the court regards the defendant guilty of the money laundering activities as charged. And this is an insane ruling, and people got pretty angry about this ruling because, on the right-hand side we have Lawrence. He's saying, you can't touch the funds, you can't custody the funds, you can't stop the funds, you can barely look at the funds, and you're guilty of money laundering. It's wild because it makes you think of who else can they go for on these grounds, right? We design Ethereum to be censorship resistant. If the government says, well, we like censoring criminals, and you should have known better that since you made it censorship resistant, you are now liable for all of the criminal activity that takes place that we can't censor. That's a very dangerous precedent to set, and it gives the developers of any sort of permissionless, privacy, or any system of that kind, infinite, forever liability for all of the criminal activity that could take place using it. And it's silly because if I make like a hammer, like wow, they literally said he should have built the product in a different way when he started. It's completely insane, right? It's like if I build a hammer, you apply the argument, well, you should have known that somebody could hit someone in the head with this. It's like that's not my fault as a hammer manufacturer to determine, I don't know, tie the person's hands or make sure that they only use the hammer at a construction site. It's like seems silly for applied to anything else. So anyway, where this is going, his bail was rejected, so he had to stay in prison to prepare for his appeal. This was actually overturned like 2 days ago. And so Alexei's out. He texted me, yesterday. I'll probably call him pretty soon, let him catch up with his family and stuff first. But we are trying to appeal this and go back to the court with new arguments and hopefully overturn the previous decision and charges. The judges said there is no legitimate use for Tornado Cash, and so for things like Oxbow, we're trying to prove them wrong. Roman Storm is the US-based, also co-founder of Tornado Cash, and 1 year after Alexei was arrested in the Netherlands, he was arrested in the US. And it's pretty annoying, it's frustrating because, even though he was complying with the investigation, he was arrested at home at 6 in the morning in front of his 3-year-old daughter. The FBI director got up, made a big statement, says, today's announcement should remind criminal organizations everywhere in the world that they are neither untraceable nor anonymous. You can't hide from us behind a keyboard, whether you're a hacker or a facilitator. And it's like, he was complying with the investigation. You could have just called him and brought him into the station. But the FBI wanted to send a message. Message received. And the other thing is, all of the development was in the open. Like if they didn't like the development, they could have sent us a pull request on GitHub or something. So he's charged with 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering, 1 count of conspiracy to violate U.S. sanctions, and a conspiracy to operate unlicensed money transmitting business, which is 45 years in prison total. He was released on bail, pled not guilty. His trial is going to be on April 15th in New York. And so, you know, they said similar things to the Netherlands court. They said the defendant and the Tornado Cash founders took no further action to prevent the Lazarus's group continued use of the Tornado Cash service. And the basic question is, like, what would you have asked them to do? They can't do anything. So it also ignored a different department in the United States called FinCEN, which regulates these financial services, that said money services businesses must accept and transmit funds in order to qualify as being money services businesses, which is, you know, when you need to KYC people and all that, because they were charged with operating an unlicensed money services business. And so they basically, the Department of Justice ignored the outstanding guidance at the time. So there is a legal debate in the US around this right now. This is a great question. I'm going to go ask the Department of Justice. So like one of the crazy things is that the sanctions against Tornado Cash were overturned in a court in the US, right? They said OFAC, the Department Office of Foreign Asset Control, which was responsible for creating sanctions, you don't actually have the legal authority to sanction a program. You can only sanction people and their property. And so it would have been really awkward if you like used Tornado Cash in the meantime, were sentenced to 25 years in prison, and then it comes out that actually they didn't have the right to sanction it in the first place. You know, fortunately that didn't come up, but if it did, then whoever did, you know, was sentenced to 25 years would be like, hello, can you get me out because the law that you sentenced me under is like not even real. It's a silly thing. So this is just a meme I made about, you know, what happens to ETH devs versus banks when HSBC launders like $1 billion to the Mexican drug cartels. Like nothing happens, they get fined. You know, it's kind of silly. And then and they can actually do something about it, right? They can freeze the accounts, they can stop it, they should have known better. But when Tornado Cash developers write some open source code, they get crucified. And so there is interesting conversations around this where it ends up defining the limits of free speech because, you know, the judge said, hello, I don't see you charging WhatsApp, you know, to the prosecution. Like we know WhatsApp, you know, does, like people use it for criminal activity also. And then the guy counters, he says, well, WhatsApp doesn't know that, you know, people are doing crimes. And so, you know, there's a question of is, you know, money speech, right? Is privatizing money also the equivalent to having encrypted communications? So we're learning where the free speech boundary really is. And I am hopeful because the United States gets things wrong a lot, but eventually gets things right after they try everything else. And who knows who this guy is? Turing, yes, Alan Turing. So this guy basically won World War II, kind of, by putting, he invented computers and encryption to break the like German Enigma codes, and they, it's pretty wild because they had to convince the Germans that they didn't actually know that they could break their codes, so they had to send a bunch of ships to like get sunk by the submarines anyway, just so that they could protect their like D-Day attack that ultimately won the war. It's a dirty business. But the outcome of this was that in America, cryptography was considered a weapon. It was that powerful. And so there's this thing called the Munitions Act. And so the Munitions Act this is when the USA banned encryption. So it said you cannot export cryptography out of the US. And so there was like a professor who was teaching an algorithms computer science class. He had a foreign exchange student in his class, and he taught his algorithms course. And the guy left, and the cops showed up, and they said, "You are exporting munitions to foreign aliens. Please go to jail." And so they fought this in court, and the cypherpunks came up in this movement, and they started printing out the encryption algorithms on T-shirts, writing it by hand, sending it, wherever they could. They fought in courts, they fought with code, and the U.S. at some point tried to backdoor all internet communications through this thing called the Clipper chip, and I think it was like a week later, the hackers basically broke it, and that was the final straw, and the government just gave up, and they said, "Okay, you guys win. We're going to put encryption everywhere." And now it mandated it. And so now every website you go to, you see that little green lockbox on your browser in the top left corner. And that says, this is, HTTPS encrypted. I am not sending clear text over the wire so that every hop in between me and the server that I'm trying to talk to can read it, my credit card statements, my information, etc. And I'm optimistic that this will go the similar way. First, the US bans it, and then they realize that actually we need this to protect ourselves. And I think what will happen is essentially China or Russia or whoever, Iran, will keep hacking all of the US honeypots, financial data, and so forth. You don't really want a bunch of government employees' transaction histories revealed to the public. And so that eventually becomes a national security concern. And if you can't protect, if you're being honest and you can't protect everybody's data, then the next best thing is let them protect themselves. And that means that every citizen should have the right to have privacy in order to secure their own, livelihoods. And I think private money will follow that same path. So we're still fighting. And there is some positive developments. And so the first thing was that the US courts overturned the sanctions against Tornado Cash, and they said it wasn't anybody's property, which is helpful for Roman Storm's case because in the court case against him, they said you controlled the whole thing. The whole thing is your company, and so you were running this illegal business, and so optimistic there. Roman Storm submitted an appeal to the US Supreme Court. So if that's accepted, then this case gets escalated to the highest court in America. Paradigm, the venture capital, donated another $1.5 million to fully fund Roman's legal defense. Thank you, Paradigm. Alexei was released on bail 2 days ago after another 8 months of being in prison without bail. And there's a new lawsuit against the Department of Justice where non-custodial crypto services should not be considered money services businesses. And if that works, then that's another point in favor of Roman and his case. Sometimes you get shot in the face and you just get up and keep going, You can just do things, right? This is just a meme I made today, thinking about how silly all this is. Where it started with me trying to do payroll privately on the blockchain, and now the Supreme Court is going to decide on the fate of private money. And so I'm a big fan of zero-knowledge proofs. I think they are critical for the future of humanity. I am so bullish on them. I think it's like stealing fire from the gods. And so I consider the Tornado Cash developers to be essentially Prometheus, putting the ETH in Prometheus, and feeding their guts to the eagles for eternity won't put out this fire. The future we want depends on zero-knowledge proof privacy. We want freedom from central bank digital currencies that create massive honeypots of citizens' financial information and transaction history forever, and then get hacked and reveal it and make everybody less safe. And we also want blockchain-based democracies where we're not using paper ballots, we're not using tamperable databases. We can prove how we voted without revealing our vote. So you can actually have proper anonymous voting systems. A couple of years ago, Andrew Yang was running for president, and he was like, we should put the elections on the blockchain, and everybody who knew what they were talking about was like, no, definitely don't do that. But now that you have zero-knowledge proofs, it actually kind of makes sense. And so in the Greek mythology, Hercules is the one who frees Prometheus, and hopefully we can all be Hercules and free our fallen comrades who dared to steal the fire of zero-knowledge proofs from the gods. If you're interested in following this, check out the Free Alexei Roman Twitter. So yeah, I think that's it. Got one question over there.
How are you extending privacy pools, I guess, token set? Is it going to support Ethereum and a bunch of other tokens, or is it going to be a limited set?
So the limiting factor is like how good the analytics systems like Chainalysis, where they operate, and I think we will try to extend it to everything that has liquidity on ETH mainnet, and then bring it to other chains. We want to launch on Gnosis chain, probably do something on layer 2s as well, and for whatever assets that people want to use. It's not really limited. It can just be deployed again and again, so long as we manage the whitelists.
All right. And with each additional token, with each additional type of token, would the whole anonymity set increase? Or how does that work?
Each system, the anonymity set of each system is just based on the deposits into that system. So if I have a ETH pool on Ethereum mainnet and I have a USDC pool on Ethereum mainnet, obviously, if you withdraw ETH out of that, you don't get any privacy from the USDC depositors, and then all the chains are separate as well.
Got it.
Question over there?
You have a living data bank, more or less, but people are entering and leaving after some time. At the same time, you cannot apply differential privacy because obviously you can't round data or funds. How do you protect against re-identification if you have to remove people?
How do I protect against re-identification?
When you enter at some point on the list and you leave the list at some point, and then I can look up, is there an amount of ETH that was put in at some point when this guy entered the list and that disappeared?
Oh, I see. Okay, so I think let me try to rephrase your question, make sure I understand it. If I put in 10 ETH and then I get accepted to the whitelist, let's say I withdraw 5 ETH, then I get taken off the whitelist. Then I privately or publicly withdraw 5 ETH, right? Now I can identify the remaining 5 ETH if I see that you withdrew. Is that what you mean?
It's more like if people have access to the whitelist, they can look up when people entered and when people left. Will this allow a connection to re-identify the connection?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because. The set of deposits is public, right? We all know who's going into the pool. And so if we take somebody off the whitelist, then you already know, at some point, if they have already deposited, if you get taken off, you can only go back to your original address anyway. So the point is to de-anonymize at least whatever funds are still in the pool. But we can't de-anonymize any of the funds that have already been withdrawn.
But you will know that the original party, apart from withdrawing the 5E, also had originally deposited 10E.
Yeah. So one of the features of our system, this is a design decision that we made, is that you can't merge deposits in the system. So if I deposit, I can't deposit 10 and then deposit 5 and then withdraw 15, right? I can deposit 10 and then I can withdraw basically any number less than 10, right? And so if you see that public withdrawal of, let's say, 5, then you do know that the anonymity set for that user is essentially all withdrawals less than 5 ETH. It could be exactly 5 ETH, but it could be like 2 and 3. It could be 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and so forth.
You mentioned with respect to the US and the classification of encryption in the 90s, that it was the US Munitions Act. But isn't that part of a much broader global phenomena of the Wassenaar Treaty and dual-use goods?
What was the last thing you said?
The dual-use goods.
Yeah.
It's a treaty called the Wassenaar Treaty. And under that treaty, anything which has dual-use classification applies globally to those countries that have signed this particular treaty, which means that the principle of what happened in the US applies in many other countries, including the European Union.
Mm-hmm. The short answer is I'm not sure. And the longer answer is like, I'm hoping that we at least get good rules established in the US, and hopefully that can, translate into better rules in Europe as well. I didn't think this was going to be how this happened. I thought it would go the other way, where the good rules started in Europe, and then I go back to, let's get something done in Switzerland, because they understand the value of privacy, and then go to the US and say, hey, look, you can't say that there's no value to this, because obviously there are people who, understand that there is. And, but it turns out that, I'm optimistic, who knows what'll happen, but I think that the way the US is going with Trump being elected, that we will get sane regulations for cryptocurrency, including for privacy.
Being Dutch, I have to tell you, when the Pertsev thing happened, it immensely surprised me. I had a similar view to yours.
Yeah.
And it's the most surprising thing that, in fact, Europe proved a harder nut than the US. And it's certainly a harder nut now that we have arrived with Trump. The second question is...
Let me address that for a sec. If I had to guess, and I don't have any special insight into this, except that on August 8th, the US sanctioned the program, and on August 10th, the Dutch arrested Alexei. I would presume that there was some coordination going on there. Yes. So somebody at the US called somebody in the Netherlands and was like, hey, can you arrest this guy? And personally, I feel that this actually happened a few months after the war in Ukraine started, and Roman and Alexei, that whole team is Russian origin. Now, Alexei had gone to the Netherlands in search of a better life and was unfortunately arrested there. And I think that if they weren't Russian, the aggression towards them would have been more limited.
So the second question is, you mentioned the example of a licensed organization. I forgot Deutsche Bank. Which one did you have? You had the 900 million, HSBC. HSBC as one example, and Tornado Cash on the other example. Now, the interesting thing is, HSBC is a licensed organization. It therefore has, when states, Scott wrote this book called Seeing as a State. Nation states can see licensed organizations. Nation states can't deal with Web3 small worlds. And so, to me, understanding a little bit about nation states, it's complete, this sounds like a total contradiction, but it's a completely logical thing. If you can't see something, if you don't have the perceptual apparatus, then you can't handle Tornado Cash, but you can totally handle the penalty systems, etc., for HSBC. And I think that's really where the conflict comes. The conflict comes, we have to become better at hard forking existing legal systems. This applies to securities, this applies to a whole bunch of things, but hard forking legal systems are massively resisted.
That wasn't a question, so I'm just going to take that one and say yes, I agree. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of solutions using ZK as a compliance tool, right? And ZK KYC, essentially, you put out a proof saying that you're above 18, you're part of this country, et cetera, et cetera. But obviously, when it comes to regulations, the entities would like to know the entire details of the user, right? And that's probably not possible with ZK proofs. Is the way where you reroute the request to the service provider who did the KYC in the first place, or is it the point where you wait for dApps not being categorized as MSB comes into play? I'm just curious where it plays.
The answer is both. So the question was, governments want, in some cases, to do KYC. They want to know who actually has the money. So Oxbow has an MSB license. If we run a relayer, it would be potentially considered an MSB. The jury's out on this, by the way, because it is also non-custodial. So it is likely, I think, that in, I don't know, 6, 12, 18 months or whatever, however long these court cases take, it is ruled that non-custodial systems are not necessarily MSBs. Maybe there is other rules that are created around these things. Maybe privacy has a special rule or something, I don't know. Maybe it is enough to KYC on the way in and not necessarily have to know which specific withdrawals correspond. But that's not how MSBs work. For MSBs, you actually have to know which specific withdrawals correspond. Kind of defeats the purpose of the entire thing because it creates a honeypot of all of the data. The only reason that it would be better than something like Coinbase in that case is that it is non-custodial, and so the money itself can't be rugged, right? That said, there are other jurisdictions that might have other rules. And so it might be good enough, for example, for, I don't know, a Switzerland company to operate a relayer that still respects our association set of who we allow into the whitelist at all. And their relayer does a check and makes sure it's like, you have to provide the proof that you were on this whitelist, or else, because I don't want to, as a relayer, process the transaction for North Korea. And so if they can do that, maybe their jurisdiction allows them to withdraw without requiring a KYC on the specific withdrawal. And so part of the design objective for the system is to make something that, while we provide the vetting service to be compliant with America's regulations, can serve a global audience in multiple jurisdictions. Okay. This poor guy.
Sorry, just a small question. I was reading about proof of innocence a while back. I'm just curious if the architecture of Oxbow is...
Same thing.
Oh, it's the same thing. Okay.
Yeah, I actually gave those guys their grant from Moloch DAO.
Okay.
And then they put it in Railgun. And so Railgun has been using a system like that. Railgun system isn't as flexible as my goal for this one, because they can't remove people from the whitelist once you get on it. It would break a lot of their internal transactions. So if you think about like the tech tree of privacy protocols, there's like fixed denomination, 1 in, 1 out, right? 10 in, 10 out. There's arbitrary denomination, and then there's basically a shielded pool. And so when you have a shielded pool, it's a lot harder to then, you have many inputs into your balance, and so you would have to go back the entire way and then prove that those inputs are still on the whitelist, but you can't do that because you don't have the data about which deposits it was if something is removed. And so it kind of breaks their shielded pool. So basically they went a little too far down the tech tree, whereas we went back and we're like, okay, we can fork off from here, which is the arbitrary denomination, and add the compliance stuff. And then later on, we'll think about how to do a shielded pool using this system.
Will 0xBAO give up the admin keys eventually? If there is such a plan, what is going to happen between launch and that event? How will it mature?
The question is, will Oxbow give up the admin keys? I don't think so. I think that we want to manage the whitelist. Now remember, where's the Ragequit slide? This is my. This is why I need therapy. It's because I really like calling smart contract functions Ragequit. If you've heard Ragequit, is actually I came up with this in Moloch DAO back in the day. But the important part here is that we don't have the ability to take the money. We only have the ability to whitelist and remove the people from the association set. And so no matter what we do, anybody who is deposited into the system can withdraw their money. So that's the trade-off that we made to satisfy our lawyers who didn't want, if we made it fully permissionless, basically for everybody who doesn't get on the whitelist, it's a privacy set for all of them together. And they didn't really think that was a great idea for us to be promoting or managing that. And the risk that we run is that the government comes to us and says, listen, dorks, we don't care about your fancy cryptography. It's all happening on the same smart contract. We are coming up with new rules since we can't sanction it to ban this smart contract, right? And that's not a great outcome for us.
So what is government?
Or any of our users.
What if the government asks you to like stop the service altogether, and then you have to comply, and you have the admin keys actually that you can do it?
We have two things we can do. The one is what I talked about, which is essentially nuke the whitelist to zero. If we take everybody off the whitelist, then everybody who's still in the pool has to publicly withdraw. We can do that. The other thing we can do is we have a one-time function called wind down. And so we have the ability to prevent any future deposits. And that essentially happens if we give up, or if we see, we let too much criminal money get into this thing, we don't want to maintain it anymore, we want to upgrade to a different version, or whatever reason, we can freeze incoming deposits from being able to be made. But we cannot, once again, take any of the money that's in the system. Those functions and the contracts they depend on are all immutable from the outset.
I mean, I understand money cannot be taken out, but that's not the only thing, right? Like the users are using the service, and then they can't have the service anymore due to whatever of these worst outcomes that can happen.
Well,
and if you give up your admin keys, then it's like nobody can really stop it after a point. So there has to be a journey to giving up of admin keys where the service is guaranteed forever for humanity, right? So that's the.
We played this game, we beat it. There's another system that I've talked about that has no admin keys. I cannot, I don't even know, because while Tornado Cash was sanctioned, it's actually a crime for me to promote the usage of Tornado Cash, because it's, promoting interacting with sanctioned entities. But if that is a concern, it's still going up, right? There's your answer.
I mean, all this happened because the admin keys are given up in some sense.
You should probably have a long chat, but both of you have very
happy to answer any questions you have offline.
Yeah.
Yeah, Oxbow is a US company.
Okay, looks like there are far too many people who have interesting views. I shall put my hand up and say I'm one of the guys who built another protocol. And like at any point in time, if you want to talk about things in a passionate sense, feel to find me. So thank you, Ameen, for an awesome talk. And thank you all very much. And if you could always find him, and just be warned, he's very passionate about whatever he does, and be mindful of asking.